You know what this is, right?
Car.
Volkswagen, okay. So we're going to build something that's similar to this. We use this sort of as a demonstration to talk about how solar cars are like cars, but how solar cars are different than cars. The reason why they're best, I guess the first thing is that they're hands-on. Students don't get enough hands-on experience, I think, these days, and so that's the first thing. The other thing is that the solar car kits are composed of a number of components, the panel and wheels and motor. When they put them together themselves, they see how components go together to make a system that actually functions. And then beyond that, of course, it gives them some exposure to solar energy. I'm not the first one to have done this, okay? Using solar car kits has been a vehicle for talking about solar energy and science for decades. But most of the time, the way they're done is that you have the components and you get some children together and they build the components consist of the panel, the wheels, the motor, and some other things, gears. Then what they do is they build the chassis for the car, the body for the car, and they attach the components to it. Typically, there's lots of solar car kits around. One of them is made by Solar Made, and there's in fact a competition called Junior Solar Sprint that uses the Solar Made components, and what they do, then the teacher buys a bunch of these kits and the kids put these together, and there's actually a competition. But typically the putting together, there's a lot of hands-on experience there, which is excellent, but it typically takes 2, 3 or more hours for them to do that, and you often don't have that time in the classroom. Then maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, I decided I would build my own little chassis, sort of pre-made chassis, but and they were sort of just a sort of a board, a little mount for the panel, and the children would have to glue the wheel axles onto the body and glue the motor onto the body, and then often the wheels bound, they didn't work too well. And the gears on the motor and the drive gear sometimes didn't mesh, so it would slip. And so there's a little disappointment there. But probably the biggest thing was that it took a long time to put it together. And then it took me a lot of time afterward tearing them apart. And also we used to lose a lot of components. A lot of the components were not usable afterwards. And so I decided to come up with a new body design to facilitate this. You each have on the table here components for putting together a car, and basically the main thing here is a solar panel, okay, a PV panel, and that PV panel, what it does, it drives a motor. So you connect, so the sun produces electricity, which drives a motor. So the panel and the motor together sort of act like the engine in a regular car. Okay, so the engine in a regular car, the gasoline plus the engine, sort of like the panel and the motor. Okay, and then what we do is we take the motor has a little gear on it, little gear on the end here, and it actually when we put them together so that this little gear here meshes with the big gear on the wheel, the drive wheel. Okay, and then these are basically attached to the car, and the way they're done, some of you have done this before, but the way we do this is we just drop the wheel in here like this, the axle in, and we use a little Velcro. It's great stuff, like baling wire when I was young, like that, and we put the idler wheels here and put them on with some Velcro. And then over on the other side, we need to put the motor on. I'm not going to do it because I'm going to let you do that, but the motor goes on, and you see this little shim here. It's very important that when you put the motor on, that the gear meshes real well with this drive gear here. If it's a little too high, it won't mesh. If it's a little too close, it'll bind and won't run very smoothly. So the way you mount the motor is you put it on here like this, and there are 2 screws, 2 little bolts actually, and nuts. So you can see a little hole in here and a hole here. You can bolt the motor on with the 2 bolts and the nuts going on the bottom, and we have some screwdrivers here to tighten it up. After you put that on, then you can take the panel, and the panel's got two leads on it, two terminals. One's positive and negative. So this is basically like a battery, plus and a negative on a battery. You drop this on here, take the alligator clips from the motor and connect it on to the panel. Now, when you do that and you put it down, you take it out in the sun, the car will go in one particular way, but let's say you don't want it to go that direction, you want it to go in the other direction. So how do you make it change the direction? Yeah? You put
these things on one side, one of them,
right,
instead of the other.
You switch the leads, right? So the alligator clips that are on the motor, you just switch on the terminals on the panel. Of course, also you could turn the car around, but you know, if you want it to be like a front wheel drive or a rear wheel drive, then you switch the leads like you suggested. So with that, we'll let you just go ahead and get started. The reason I designed my own kits is that it's relatively easy for the kids to put the cars together. Not as much hands-on experience as you might get if they built the body themselves, but they can put them together in a relatively short time. I can talk a little bit about solar energy. We can go out and race the cars and come back and talk a little bit about it. That evening, instead of spending a lot of time taking glue apart and solder apart, I can disassemble these and put them back together. And in fact, we often do these sort of back-to-back, you know, could be 2 or 3 classes, you know, one after the other. So we can do them back-to-back, as they're easy to put together, easy to disassemble. But they still get the experience of understanding the various components and how the components go together to make a car. And they have an ownership, they have a sense of ownership of it afterwards, and are often sort of excited about the fact that they put something together and tried it out and it worked. Solar car kits are good teaching tools for science education because, you know, the idea of the hands-on and the components and the system engineering and the solar energy all together make it good. For example, as a contrast, it's very difficult to come up with, if you were to build a car, some kind of a vehicle, other than maybe a battery-powered car, you couldn't build a nuclear-powered car in the classroom, or even a gasoline-powered car in the classroom, or a natural gas-powered car in the classroom, because the components, the engine is just not, there aren't gasoline-powered engines that students can fool around with. But a little motor and a panel, they can. We've done it with a lot of age groups, and it works with almost any. I've done it in high schools, so for high schools students, and I've done it for youngsters from, you know, kindergarten and even below. I think really the best age is probably maybe 4th or 5th grade, because that's when they're starting to learn about energy transformation. They've learned a little bit about renewable energy, they know about fossil fuels, and so I think they can relate to it better. But they can be used for basically any age, but that's the best. We provide the solar car kits fairly widely now. I got a grant from the Department of Energy 2 years ago maybe to build a number of kits or sets of kits to be able to distribute to schools. And the school, typically our target is elementary schools, 4th or 5th grade. But now I think we have car kits. We have a group in Fort Worth that has a set. We have a group in Dallas that has a set. The people in the solar energy group in Houston has a set. Baylor University has a set. San Antonio has a set, Solar San Antonio. And we have, well, I have a set, and there's 1 or 2 sets in Austin that people use. Oh, there's a group of students at the university, it's Engineering Students for a Sustainable World. They have a set that they use for outreach. And recently, I took a set on going to California. I took a set dropped off a set in El Paso, so they have a set. So there's maybe about 7 or 8 sets that are scattered around now, and I still have 2 or 3 sets left. The best way to get in touch with me probably would be through the Texas Solar Energy Society. You can easily find them on the web, the Texas Solar Energy Society, TXSES, and sort of for Texas. And you could contact Texas and get in touch with me that way. One of the things, you know, we have some sets available, but what I would really like to do is to get people to replicate these. They're relatively easy to build. If somebody wanted to put on to build them. In fact, when I took the set to El Paso, the woman that took the sets there is a teacher in a school, and it turns out they have a fellow that teaches the shop class, and so they could actually cut the little boards out and make them themselves. And so hopefully, and I think they probably will in El Paso replicate these and make their own sets and maybe even ship them across the border.
On the second day, the car racing, going on, and the professor said, well, what y'all, how do you guys feel about a break? Come back, and some of you raised their hands and said, when do we get to race the solar cars? And so they're like, everybody, where's the other one? We're out in the parking lot. Oh no, oh yeah, here.